should be all good to welcome here now on to Jimmy at the Crossroads, our first guest of the day. She is one of the co-executive directors of the new National Coronavirus Recovery Commission, headed up and put together by the Heritage Foundation, where she is the vice president, heading up the Institute for Family, Community, and Opportunity. Charmaine Yoest joins us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Charmaine, hello. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Jimmy. How are you?
You know, I'm doing great. How are you amidst everything?
You know, we're doing okay. It's a little humbling when there's so many people who are really, really suffering. And when all we're being asked to do is work at home, I can't complain at all.
You know, I think that's the positive and uplifting way we all need to look at it, especially during these difficult times, because everybody's dealing with challenges. A lot of it is perspective, especially if you, like you and I both, we have it a little bit better than some others. And that's why I think a commission like the Heritage Foundation's National Coronavirus Recovery Commission is of tremendous value, especially because we need to keep in mind what not to do during a crisis like this and after a crisis like this, as much as what to do during and after. So, Charmaine Yoest, tell us a little bit about this commission.
Well, our big concern is that this is a crisis on two fronts. It has two elements to it. First, of course, is the health, and that's what everybody's been really focused on. But now we're starting to see, with the economy shut down in this unprecedented way, we've got people who are suffering on that side of the equation too. You know, small business owners who are looking at a lifetime of work threatened by not having customers. Hourly workers who, count on steady income to be able to pay their rent, to buy their groceries. You know, these are things that can't be just sit tight and just wait for this thing to play out, particularly given the fact that we can't give them an endpoint and say this is the specific time when the economy is going to go back to normal. And so our president, Mrs. K. James, said, look, we need to find a balance here and a way to move forward to get people back to work. And there needs to be an outside group who's looking at this critically and working to put some recommendations together to kind of look over the horizon. You know, right now it looks like the government is up to their eyeballs, both the federal and at the state and the local level, with working to flatten the curve and to find ways to deal with a virus that's never been seen before. So we pulled together representatives from the medical community, from the business community, from civil society, people in ministry, and just put a lot of smart people together, not in a room, but a virtual table, if you will, to bat some ideas around.
Now, in terms of overall guiding philosophy, I mean, one of the things that I've always appreciated about the Heritage Foundation is the guidance of first principles and looking at some fundamental values to keep in mind. What do you and the Commission think are the key overarching principles that policymakers must not lose sight of as we get through this crisis and then move beyond it?
Well, our big concern was kind of this bifurcation of pushing the two different elements of this into almost competing factions. It's almost like what you're starting to see out there. The people are like, throw the economy back open, or people are saying, leave everybody at home. There has to be a middle way where we start to move forward that isn't separating people along those lines. We believe firmly that good health policy leads to good economic policy. There's an element of trust here that, frankly, people are being asked to sacrifice and to voluntarily stay home. In different states are different. Actually, where I live in Virginia, we do have a mandatory stay-at-home order, but at the end of the day, in America, it's dependent on people coming together and making decisions collectively. And so we, as people, if we open up the economy too quickly and too soon, and people don't have the trust that their health care is going to be taken care of, that's not going to work either. So that's why we keep saying these two threads have got to move forward hand in hand together. Good health policy leads to good economic policy.
Now, at the same time, Charmaine Yoest, our guest from the Heritage Foundation, I think there are a lot of Americans who are understandably and rightly concerned, I would count myself among them, about issues of civil liberties and the notion that maybe there's a line at which the government has crossed or may cross at some point that we must be mindful of. So when you're trying to find that balance that you're talking about of public health and economic health and also the civil liberties, how do you think policymakers should be looking at weighing those different aspects? Because while we want to make sure, as you're talking about, public health has primacy because you need to make sure that people can go about their day-to-day lives without threat of their right to life being subjugated to getting this virus and possibly losing their life. But at the same time, also making sure that we keep in mind and abide by what makes America so special.
Well, exactly, and one of those key things is federalism, right?
Yes.
I think that the president has been at his best when he has pushed back on this idea that all decisions have to be made at the federal level. I think you're seeing such a really, really robust response coming from governors and local leaders across the country, because let's be honest, this is a very large country, and this virus is hitting different communities differently. It's hitting just both geographically, but also physically. You know, as the medical people are trying to get on top of what age groups and what different kinds of medical conditions are more at risk. Men more at risk than women. You know, what an unusual situation that is. And so it's never before. Maybe not never, but this is just a really unusual situation for underscoring the wisdom the founders had in putting together a federal system where we're able to push governance and decisions down closest to the people. What an illustration of how necessary that is in a situation like this. California is having a very, very different response to this virus than New York is. And so far, California is being more successful. And so people are looking at those differing situations and saying, how does this apply to me? And now we're starting to see some regional responses, governors kind of banding together and saying, how does this make sense for our region? Another good way of working out what federalism means on the ground and in people's everyday lives.
You know, Charmaine Yoest, our guest, Vice President of the Institute for Family, Community, and Opportunity at the Heritage Foundation, I think it's so important that you just underscored the significant role of federalism in our society, in our country, our structure of government, and in addressing this particular crisis. A lot of people have been talking about, and I talked earlier in the show, about President Trump's comment yesterday about the president having total authority, which does kind of, his statement goes against how he's actually been operating in a functional way, which I think has been encouraging, as you have, in terms of different states being able to do what's best for their states. I'm here in Colorado. I never thought I would say positive things about Governor Jared Polis, but I think he's governed in a way that's been better than a lot of Democrats in other parts of the country. I've been pleased with some of his aspects of approach here. So I think that the one thing that some people are concerned about who are advocates of federalism as the Constitution prescribes, Charmaine, and also who are supportive of the president's more federalism-based approach, are a little, struggling with how to deal with his comment yesterday in the context of what we're discussing.
I think today's briefing at 5 o'clock this afternoon Eastern Time, I think it's going to be a really critical one. I'll be really surprised if the president doesn't come out and make some sort of clarifying statement, because it didn't really follow with what constitutional scholars across the board of every political stripe know to be true. So I think he must have had something else in mind, because like you said, one of the reasons I led off with the fact that he operationally has been really, really good when people have pressed him on saying, don't you think Kirstie Noem down in South Carolina that she should, I'm sorry, not South Carolina, in any event, that she should be making different decisions for her state. And he has been really resolute in saying, no, the governors need to make decisions for their states. So his language yesterday didn't line up with what he's been operationally saying all the way along, and So it'll be interesting to see where he goes with that today.
Again, when it comes to this National Coronavirus Recovery Commission, let's get back to the commission on which you are one of the two executive directors. How do you hope policymakers will take what you are all doing, and you have just a stellar group of folks coming together for this? How do you hope they will take what Heritage Foundation puts forward and put it to use?
Well, our hope is that we are able to be useful, and because things are moving so quickly, it's a very unusual situation to bring a commission into. And in fact, we had our first meeting last week and we talked about this, that, usually you have commissions that do kind of a retrospective on something. And here we are trying to speak into a very dynamic situation that changes, if not by the day, sometimes by the hour. But we decided it was really essential to get some really bright minds working on this. And so we're trying to give rolling recommendations. We'll come out with an interim report in May and a final report in June, but obviously we want to be able to be relevant to the current conversation. So, obviously the White House would be one audience, but we also, going back to this part about trust and people having an ability to sort through some of what they're hearing and seeing, we want to be able to be a resource to the general public as well. And so hope people will come over and interact with us at heritage.org. We have a resource page set up that's dedicated to assembling resources on the coronavirus. We also, for the commission, at coronaviruscommission.com, there's a web page and a web form there for people from the public to come in and leave comments for the commissioners. We already have over 200 that we're going through. We'd love to hear from your listeners at coronaviruscommission.com. And, because it's important, I think one of the most inspiring things that we've seen is how civil society is coming together. Artists and whenever they say always look for the helpers, well, Americans are good at that kind of thing.
Yes. And
it's been inspiring to see Americans coming together, and we want to keep emphasizing that about that's what's going to take us out of this crisis. There's not going to be a particular government thing that quote unquote rescues the American people. We have a long-standing tradition of doing that ourselves.
Well said, Charmaine Yoest, Vice President of the Heritage Foundation and Co-Executive Director of the National Coronavirus Recovery Commission. Again, check out the websites heritage.org and coronaviruscommission.com. Charmaine, really appreciate you taking the time today, and so glad you all are putting together and have put together this commission. So keep it up, and we'll talk again.
Great to be with you. Take care.
Thank you. You as well. And best wishes. Stay healthy and well. Once again, Charmaine Yoest joining us from the Heritage Foundation. I really think